This podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. We extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today.
Hello and welcome to Give and Toke Cannabis Conversations, the show that aims to elevate the conversation about cannabis to a higher level. I'm your host Paul, and today we welcome Christina McMullan. Christina is an Australian-Canadian cannabis enthusiast who, under the handle AusCannaReviews, is establishing herself as an important patient voice in Australia's medical cannabis scene. Using social media and Substack, she provides in-depth cannabis reviews exploring flavour, visuals, aromas, genetics, terpene profiles, and most importantly, the effects of medical cannabis. Christina's writing is an important resource for medical cannabis patients while Australia's industry is in its infancy, and she continues to prove herself to be a reliable resource with her in-depth reviews of products available here in Australia. If you like what you hear on today's show, be sure to subscribe, follow, and leave a 5-star rating and review. But for now, please enjoy my conversation with Christina McMullan from AusCannaReviews. Welcome to the show, Christina.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
So these days you spend your time living in the warmth of Queensland. Surprisingly, I prefer the cold of Canada. Overall, which one do you prefer?
Oh, no, I'm the other way. I prefer the warmth over the cold any day. Yeah, look, I gotta be honest, I don't miss it at all. Anytime that you live somewhere where there's snow on the ground, like 9 months out of the year, it's not fun. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah, that's it. I've just got kind of the novelty experience, so that's what I'm going off there. But, you know, as somebody who felt privileged to live in the majestic scenery of BC, I'm incredibly grateful for my time in Canada. What brought you to Australia?
So believe it or not, I'm actually Australian. I'm like fourth or fifth generation on my mom's side to be born here. So we stole a loaf of bread from somebody we weren't supposed to or something.
Yeah, convict here as well.
Yeah. We moved away when I was young, when I was 7. So we moved to Texas. And then I left Texas after I graduated university and went up to Canada. My dad is Canadian, so I actually have dual citizenship between Australia and Canada. That's how I ended up in Vancouver, because it was kind of the warmest spot in Canada.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's really cool. I didn't realize that you'd been all over the place. And those are a couple of different places with very different approaches to cannabis. You know, Texas versus Canada is a very, very severe change in attitudes. So I'm keen to dive into, you know, where your attitudes have come from. But I guess first I'm wondering, what is your personal relationship with cannabis? You know, why do you care so much about cannabis? Why are you spending your time reviewing these medicinal Australian cannabis products?
I guess, to put it simply, it's something that's allowed me to have a quality of life back. I'm somebody that's had chronic migraines basically since I was like 12 years old. And I've been on all sorts of drugs, and they always make you feel really loopy and disconnected. And you just, I don't know, you just kind of glide through life, if you will. And you develop anxiety because you never know when this migraine is going to get you and how it's going to affect you and blah, blah, blah. And so, super long story short with it, I got into cannabis because I was kind of over being prescribed pharmaceuticals, right? My body, my choice, if you will. And I just wanted to try something different. And through trial and error over the years, I've finally managed to get to a point where I don't have them anymore. And so that's something that I feel should be, I don't want to say celebrated. That's kind of, selfish, if you will, but it's something that, I feel like if more people talked about the benefits about it, I think more people would be willing to try something different.
I think that's one of the benefits of living somewhere where it's accepted. You know, I think it was my time in Vancouver that made me really understand the importance of it, and it allowed me to have these conversations with people, particularly when I got home, and they were a little bit uncomfortable conversations to have. But I think celebrated is a good word, because so often we're told there's not enough data about cannabis. We're still trying to find whether it works. But time and time again, you find so many people who have found benefits and found relief. So I'm really glad that you found that relief there as well. Whenabouts was it that you discovered that worked for you? So how long have you been using cannabis now?
So I probably started first using in my late teens, and it was very much Texas black market, Mexican dirt, brick weed, if you will. And it was very much just social hanging out with friends, getting the giggles, getting the munchies kind of thing. But it wasn't until I moved to Vancouver in the early 2000s where I was dealing with a lot of stuff. My dad was dying from cancer and a lot of stress, if you will, because I couldn't be home as much as I wanted to be home. And so I started to, I guess, use cannabis a little bit more for my own personal, I guess, use as a little less social. And then I had this amazing chance opportunity that I met this guy that kind of just blew my mind and introduced me to like the world of, oh no, cannabis can do this and cannabis can do that. And it's not all stoner on the couch. And like I said, he blew my mind. And in a time where I really needed cannabis to do more than just melt me in the couch. And that's what it did. And to have that experience in my early 20s, I've been preaching ever since, if you will.
Yeah. Oh, right on, right on. Well, we're going to dive into Vancouver a little bit later into the episode. So I'm going to first start by talking to you about the wonderful work you're doing online as AusCannaReviews. So describe your work and how you came to be doing this.
So AusCannaReviews is basically feature-length articles where I give you genetics and then terpenes and then my personal experience with whatever cultivar that I would be reviewing. I personally believe that genetics and terpene profiles are a way better indicator as to how you're going to react to a particular cultivar than just the classic sativa and indica labels that were kind of force-fed, if you will. So yeah, I took it upon myself to do a little bit of education, if you will.
I think it's important for people to start to understand that. And ultimately, with these ideas, we're planting seeds because some people still need the very baseline indica sativa hybrid, but anyone in the know really knows that they're not fair characterizations. There's sativas that work really well for people that put them to sleep, and there's indicas that alert people and keep them excited and aroused during the day. So those classifications don't really work. So it's great that you're digging into this. What do you want people to achieve or gain from reading your reviews? If someone is reading it, what's your desire for them?
I hope that as they're reading it, there's actually a lot of reviews now. I think I've reviewed something like 25 flowers. So I
27 on my count.
Oh, 27. Ooh. Okay. So I hope that when you go in there and you start reading things that you can start to pick out patterns as to, if I say this cultivar makes me really sleepy and it gives me the munchies, but then you try it and it's like a completely different experience. And then you come across another cultivar where I say the same thing and you have the same reaction, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, the light's gone on. When this chick tells me it makes her sleepy and gives her the munchies, no, that makes me focused and in the zone and want to go get her kind of thing. And so I hope over time that I'm developing a relationship with my readers that, we kind of come to an understanding that everybody's different and what works for me might not work for you, but let's have a discussion about it. Let's talk about things.
You're almost like an online bud tender, like it's so important when people go into a cannabis store that they start to build a relationship with different bud tenders. When I worked in a store, there were certain people that would gravitate towards me because of my preferences and my taste profiles. And then there'd be people who are like, no, I'm not talking to you today because whatever you gave me last time is a complete wrong thing for me. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's true. It's true though, right? Like, again, over time, you develop a relationship with people that, again, what works for me might not work for you, but hopefully, we can figure it out together.
So you use a star rating for different products. In a nutshell, what would be the factors that contribute to something that's on the higher end of the scale, 4 or 5 stars?
Oh, I look at a lot of different things, right? Like everything from, price, if you will, to genetics and terpenes. I'm always looking at COAs, those certificates of analysis to see, where our terpene values are. I do something called the sticky icky test, which without diving too far into it is basically, it goes beyond me just squeezing some buds and seeing if they stick to my finger. There's a lot more that goes into that. Part of that comes from trial and error. You buy enough cannabis from enough people in enough countries, you'll learn a couple things along the way, if you will. But, it's, I guess the most important thing is that when I open the tub, I look at it, I write down my initial thoughts, my observations. This is what it smells like. This is kind of what the buds look like, all of those initial thoughts. And then, I break them into my dosing caps for my Mighty Plus, and then I put it into rotation for about a week, and I jot down notes for about a week, and then I take it out of rotation. And then I bring it back in about 7 to 10 days later. And then I compare those notes again. And I run that sticky icky test again. Does it still stick to my fingers? Because sometimes, you open that tub and you just get blown away with, I don't know, it's like, ooh, it's so new and it smells so great. But then you come back 10 days later and you're like, it was okay. And so for me, it's really important that, if I'm going to spend $150 on 10 grams or more, that whatever I'm giving a 5-star to consistently performs, it sticks, it ticks all those boxes. Like, I'm getting bang for buck, so to speak, right? And I'm not going to lie, if somebody's priced at $170, that expectation is a lot higher.
Yeah, totally. There's some really good things at kind of the $130 mark. So yeah, if something's going to be $40 more, it's got to be that way for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. It's gotta really separate itself out somehow, some way. Is it amazing flavor? Are there amazing effects? Are the flowers, the buds, are they beautiful? Like, give me something to rave about at $170, and I'll give you that 5 for sure. But if it's not there, then it's not there. And you're right. There's a lot of decent stuff out there at $130, at $100 even. It's, finding what works for you at the end of the day, right?
What would be some of the benchmarks of some of the lower rated stuff? I have seen a 2-star review. I'm not sure if there has been a 1-star review, but what's the disappointment factor on something that's scoring that low? What's going on with that?
So I think, and you might have to fact check me later on it, I think I've only given one-star review, and it really came down to, it was a horrible trim job. There was an excessive amount of stem in there. I think there was, if I remember correctly, there was one stem that was like the size of my pinky with like nothing attached to it. And I was like, ooh, buddy. But, we're laughing about it. But the truth is that once you pull all those stems out, that's a medicating session for somebody. Like for me, I do the dosing caps in the Mighty Plus, right? So they're 0.15 of a gram is what a dosing cap is. So if I pull out half a gram of stem, I've lost some serious medicating sessions there. And if it was any other type of pharmaceutical, like, you could get a refund on that. You could complain to somebody.
Yeah, you get a blister pack of 20 tablets and 3 are missing. There's going to be a replacement. Yeah,
exactly. There's some sort of recourse. And unfortunately for us as medicinal cannabis patients, it's kind of suck it up, deal with it. It's just kind of how it is.
Very much so. I mean, on that note, have you had any kind of pushback or negative feedback from any of those companies that maybe have appeared on the lower end of the spectrum?
No, not really. I mean, every now and then, how do I articulate this? I think, you know what, honestly, all bullshit aside, I get more pushback from the Reddit community.
Oh God, don't get me
started.
Like,
again, all bullshit aside, like, yeah, I've butted heads here and there with various companies, but it is what it is, right? Like I'd like to believe we're a professional, if you will. We say our piece, we move on. But it kind of blows me away sometimes just how defensive people in the Reddit community get when I, say I really don't like something, or that I really do like something. Sometimes, I've definitely been accused of, being in cahoots with somebody, or, whatever. And I'm like,
that's a classic accusation on Reddit. Yeah, you like something, therefore you must work for them.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, no, bud, you want to see my pharmacy bill? I'm like, it's all coming out of my own pocket. Trust me, man. Trust me. Like, there's nobody supporting me right now. But at the end of the day, it's, I'm one bitch with an opinion, or not even that, I'm just somebody who, this is going to age me, but I've been consuming for 30 years. And so I just know what I want and what I don't want. And I guess I know how to articulate that. And that's going to gravitate some people towards me. And that's going to, alienate some other people away from me. And it is what it is.
It's good to kind of accept that, because I think there's a nice, warm, fluffy idea of what the cannabis community is, but it is a collection of random people that really have cannabis in common as the core thing, and therefore you're going to get all sorts of differences of opinions, from gatekeeping to pure sharing and loving and everything in between. So you've kind of just got to play the game, because those people are going to be around. They're going to be offended by something that someone says. They're always going to be there. So it's good that you kind of let that wash off your back, because I think that's important. Reddit is a great resource on many occasions, but also is a source of mental health problems for many people very regularly.
Yeah. Like I said, you know what, for the vast majority of interactions are overwhelmingly positive, and it is a great space to be in. So yeah, overwhelmingly positive for sure. Yeah.
So now that you have reviewed 27 products this year, have you noticed any general trends about Australian medical cannabis? Like, are there any broad brushstrokes you can paint about these products over the last year?
Oh, they're definitely getting better. The flowers themselves are definitely getting better, which is why I guess it's harder to get fives these days, right? I started it almost a year ago, like in March, it'll be a year. And so I don't want to say there were slim pickings for flowers, but my God, have we like exploded in what the options are now. So the market is much more competitive. And so because of that, it is harder to give out, I don't want to say give out, but to earn a five, right? At the end of the day, most of the stuff that we're getting now is pretty good. Like, all things considered, it's pretty good, right? I mean, I guess my biggest complaint is price. I wish it was cheaper. I wish it was more competitive in that sense. I wish that we had more homegrown flowers, a little less imported flowers, but those are, personal preferences. And I think we'll get there though.
Yeah, we hope that those are kind of, walk before you run scenarios, that we've got all this, year-old Canadian weed coming into our medical market, just because we're still tiptoeing in. We hope that down the line there are more Australian producers and more competitive prices, because, I mean, that's what's happened in Canada. There's still room for a $70 3.5 gram jar of top shelf cannabis. There's also room for $65 ounces and everything in between. So we really do hope we can get to that stage, because I think we are getting there. It's been exciting to see the progress in the time that we've had. I know I certainly was a little bit sad about coming back to Australia after living in Vancouver, and I'm quite proud of what we've got going on, as slow as many aspects are.
I think we've come a long way, right? Like, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of companies that are trying very hard to bring in good genetics. And like I said, I do think we'll get there. It's just we're in a little bit of a waiting stage, right? So, watch this space. It'll get better.
Something I've really enjoyed is your Terpene of the Month series. Do you have a favorite terpene yourself?
Oh, hands down, terpinolene.
For the listeners, here's the 101 on terpinolene. Tell us about that. What are the features of terpinolene?
Oh no, you put me on the spot. Now I'm like, I don't know.
Gotta check the data.
No, see, the biggest thing about terpinolene is that it's very much kind of like an entourage terpene, right? So it likes to kind of pair with other terpenes. But for me personally, the biggest thing that I guess I kind of knew, but I didn't know until I did the Terpene of the Month series, was that, again, to go back to sativa and indica and being very generalization, sativa is going to lift you up and indica is going to bring you down. Well, that's kind of bullshit, because there was a survey that they did in the States, and it's actually linked in that Terp of the Month article, where they're talking about, they took a bunch of random samples off of shelves in the States, in legal states, where they tested all of this cannabis, where they were looking at the labels of what they were all labeled at. And super long story short with it, overwhelmingly, the only thing that came out of it was terpinolene was in the flowers that were labeled sativa more than twice as much as what they were in the indica flowers.
Yeah, because when I think of terpinolene, it's like Chemdog and Jack Herer and things like that. Some of the hazes.
Yeah, haze, exactly. And so instead of looking for sativa, I started looking for things that were high in terpinolene, right? And then all of a sudden I was like, oh wow, this is my long lost love. I had no idea that this is where I needed to be my whole life. Because when I started to look back at other strains that I've liked from my youth, if you will, they've been high in terpinolene. And I'm like, wow, who knew? But yeah, straight up, if you're looking for something that's going to lift you up, terpinolene is where it's at.
There's definitely like an important, I think, Venn diagram that cannabis consumers can start to do on their own to look at, yeah, what are the common threads between the things that they enjoy? You know, I, for one, have identified that if limonene is the dominant terpene in something, very high chance that it will increase my heart rate and increase my anxiety. It's not, you know, a scientific process, but that's what I've seemed to have identified. And that seems to remain consistent. And that's just through that trial and error. And that's kind of hard to do with the expensive prices of medical cannabis, but it is an important part of the journey.
It is a huge part of the journey because how do you know? God, it sounds horrible. You got to make yourself a guinea pig because how do you know what works and what doesn't work? You know, a perfect little side tangent, but a perfect example of that is I've been somebody that never, ever, 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 ever have I ever met an edible that worked for me. Just never. Like it just, I don't know, sad times, if you will. But I totally wanted to do oil. I was like, yeah, let's do this and all these benefits and CBD and blah, blah, blah. But the results were so inconsistent and it's so expensive. And I was just like, okay, I'm just going to give up on this because I want it to work for me, but it's not working for me kind of thing. And through my own research, I discovered nanoemulsions, which was like a game changer for me. Can I say that? Yeah, I'm going to say that. It's a game changer for me because now all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, this works for me. I mean, this is so great. This is what I've been missing out on my whole life. If you will, I mean, I still feel like I take excessive amounts compared to when I talk to other patients or friends back in the States kind of thing. But to be able to know what my dose is for something and then to be able to use it therapeutically has been a game changer for me. I'm a huge fan of CBD now, whereas before I was like, I want to believe it'll work. Whereas now I know, like, this is my dose, this is what I do, and this absolutely works for me.
2 points there really resonated with me. First of all, CBD I thought was snake oil on the first couple of products that I tried. Nothing worked for me. It didn't do anything. I'm like, why am I spending money on this non-intoxicating cannabis product that's not helping me? And it only took, I think, the fourth product I tried to realize, oh my God, this thing actually works really well for me. And they were just this kind of completely pedestrian 10 milligram capsule, $14 for a jar of 10. I'd tried all these expensive oils and different patches and creams and things, weren't working for me. And then finally it all clicked. And now CBD is an important part of my rotation. It's an essential part of my rotation. So yeah, I think it's almost a bit of a warning to people to not give up on the first thing that they try, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like I said, well, I mean, I tried and tried and tried. I could bore you all day long with stories going through university of, baking brownies for friends and they're on the ground laughing their asses off. And I'm sitting there with the pan going, yep, good times, guys, good times. You know, I don't know, I guess I kept trying, kept thinking to myself, I'll eventually figure it out. But like I said, nano emulsions, and then yeah, the light went on and it was like, wow, CBD oil, or sorry, CBD, like nano emulsion, where's that been my whole life? It's so great. Like, I love it. I really do.
Well, that's the second thing that resonated with me is the nano emulsion, because while I lived in Canada, I completely stopped consuming alcohol because these nano emulsion beverages came out. So if anyone's listening who isn't aware of what this means, it's essentially exploding the compound of THC into far smaller parts so that the uptake can be quicker into your bloodstream, so that you feel the effects quicker, but they also wear off quicker. So you'll find these in products like on a recreational market, in like pretend beers and infused sparkling waters and things like that. I'd take, 4 or 5 of those camping with me, get a nice little buzz on, 5 milligrams THC, 5 milligrams CBD, so it was nice and balanced, have this nice little buzz. But there were far less calories. I wouldn't have a hangover the next day. So even from a recreational perspective, it changed my relationship with kind of social drinking. Less calories, less poisoning my body. These things are really exciting.
Yeah, look, I got friends in Canada that love it. Like that, like what you're saying, that's what they do now. They throw those into the esky and they head out and they go camping. That's way more fun because exactly what you're saying. They get up the next morning and they're still functional. And it's still good times, right?
Yeah.
So maybe we'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
We can hope, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Look, we're tiptoeing slowly. I think there are some things that really get me down. Like, I look at the opportunity for Victoria to change the drug driving laws. Legalized Cannabis presented a bill in March to amend our drug driving laws. There was a lot of support. The Victorian government has said, yep, we're going to do an 18-month trial to find out data that already exists. So we're going to look at kind of 3 years down the line for this law to change when, medical cannabis was legalized in 2016. So something like that is ultimately going to take 10 years. So you look at something like that and it gets depressing. But then on the other hand, you do have to get excited about products getting better, products getting a little bit cheaper, better access for medical cannabis for people. And, just be a little bit patient and be happy that we've got anything at all.
I think the big thing is that we need to have more conversations about it. I think we need to talk to, again, if you're anybody that's had cannabis in your life and that it's been positive for you, I think telling people about it, breaking down the stigma. I know we got to go through this trial in Victoria in 18 months and yada, 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 but the evidence is there. Like Canada's already got the evidence. There are other countries that have, again, Israel's got medicinal as well. There's other countries that we can pull all of this data from that, no, we haven't seen deaths on the road skyrocket because of it. So I think
Tasmania are already doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think if we keep having these conversations, yes, while we're waiting for this trial to kind of play out in Victoria, we put more pressure on it to happen faster in other states, if you will, right?
Well, it's a lot of people using medical cannabis in Australia. We're now looking at, I think 1 in 9 people that have used it recreationally in the last year. If, half of these people or a quarter of these people started having more reasonable conversations with people around them, their loved ones and their MPs, we might actually see a bit more pressure. I know in Victoria, we've just pushed to get 1,000 emails sent to the Premier. And, 1,000's great, but it could be 20,000.
Oh, for sure.
Like if people really stepped up.
For sure. Because when you stop to think about it, 1 in 9, that's a lot of us.
Yeah.
If you will. That's a lot of us. I think, again, there's a big stigma with it. And the only way you break down the stigma is if you have the conversation. And the only way to have the conversation is, again, to be reasonable, like what you're saying, right? I think going out and beating the drum for reefer madness and, stoner on the couch and I just want to, melt into the couch and take my bong rips and that's not going to advance the cause, right? But there's a lot of us that are productive members of society that show up to things on time, they're reliable, that just want to participate in having a job and things like that. But now we can't because I can't because my job is going to drug test me, which, okay, little tangent, if you will. I went to a friend's birthday 2 weekends ago, and long story short with it, I met this delightful woman there, and as we were talking back and forth, she said that she worked in operations for a retirement community and that they were hiring a groundskeeper. And so the groundskeeper came in, they filled out the application, blah, 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 went for the drug test and failed the drug test because they came back positive for THC. And so she asked me, well, what could this person possibly be doing THC for? What, and bless her heart, she was very naive. And, we had a really long conversation about it. But I said to her, hear me out. I don't know this person, but shits and giggles. They work manual labor if they're a groundskeeper, that they've worked with their hands, they've carried heavy things. Who knows? Maybe they have arthritis in their hand. Maybe they have a herniated disc. Maybe they've got a blown out knee. They've physical injury. Maybe they're dealing with a parent who's dying, who's got cancer, and they can't sleep at night, and it's insomnia. And so, in fact, they're having a very small bit at night before they go to bed, so they can sleep, so they can come in and work for you the next day. And this woman was like, "Oh, you could do all of those things? I had no idea." And I was like, well, that's just it. I don't know about you, but I'd rather work with a groundskeeper who potentially was under the influence of cannabis the night before so he can come in to work than somebody who's coming in under opiates.
100%.
I'm like, that's just me though, right? And so as we're having this conversation, I was like, well, why don't you ask that person why they failed? And she was like, oh no, we can't. That's just it. HR, they're done. They're done. HR, they're done. And I'm like, that's the problem. That's the problem right there. We're not having the conversation. If somebody had just said, are you taking this because you're under doctor's care, or is this an illicit substance? Because this woman straight up told me that their the way their company policy is written is for illicit substances. So if this individual had just produced their doctor's note, their TGA approval, and had just said, hey, I'm an insomniac, or hey, I blew out my knee playing footy and it acts up when the rain comes in, like anything, if you will, then this person could have gotten this job. But now, nope, they failed THC, no conversation, no nothing. Next applicant, moving on.
It's so disappointing to hear stories like that. And I think that they're happening every day because of social stigma and also professional stigma. These people aren't asking the extending and further questions, therefore don't understand why people might do it. And it's a broad brushstroke to just go, yep, THC user, you don't deserve a job.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly. Just whoosh. There you go. Done. Moving on. And so I guess it's up to people like you and me to have those conversations, right? To talk to people and tell people, no, it's not, what you might think it was back in the day, so to speak, or what the stigma was tied to it back in the day.
I don't think stoners, quote unquote stoners, have really done this work to ruin their reputation as much as kind of people in the media and conservatives have done. So we need to change those minds, and I'm really glad that you're doing the work that you're doing to help change those minds.
One review at a time.
That's right. So if people follow your Instagram, they'll notice that you're quite a fan of the Mighty Plus. You've mentioned that you use that. I guess vaporization is your preferred method of intake. Talk to us about that. How did you discover dry herb vaporization, and how is that a part of your day?
Oh man, so I actually got exposed to the Mighty, wow, like 2015, like the original one, 2014, like somewhere in there. And, whatever, straight up, it was my black market dealer. He came over and he was like, you're gonna love this. It's so amazing. And I was like, bro, I don't know, right? Like I was very much a combustion girl at the time, very much into, doing buckets and bong rips. But he was like, no, you're going to love it. It's going to blow your mind. He's like, try it, try it, try it. And I was not impressed. I was like, nah, what is this? Whatever. He's like, don't you taste the flavor? And he's like trying to, like, I know, I remember standing in our garage, like our heated garage in like Grand Prairie, Alberta. And yeah, good times. He was trying hard to sell me on it. And I was like, it's shit.
I've been that guy. I've been the like, oh, taste the flavors guy. And people are just like, nah, give me a joint.
There you go. There you go. So whatever. So I'm a joint smoker. I'm a whatever. But you when you make your commitment to medicinal, you're like, okay, let's do this, right? And after doing a little bit of research, yeah, there were a couple other vaporizers I looked at, this and that, but I was like, fuck it, like this guy's been around, it's been around the block, so in theory it knows what it's doing, right? And so yeah, I bit the bullet with it, and I'm glad I did. There was a learning curve with it. I didn't like it at first, right? Like but now, yeah, I prefer doing the Mighty over anything else, to be honest.
I just got a Volcano about 2 or 3 months ago. Now I'm probably on my 5th dry herb handheld vaporizer by now. I've had them for a long time, and particularly in Canada in the cold evenings, it was really good to just crack the door open slightly and stay inside in the warmth and use the dry herb vaporizer. So it is a bit of a learning curve, as you mentioned. It does take some time to adjust to that, but one of the things that I really appreciate, being that flavor guy, it does have way better flavor, and I think it goes a lot further. I've halved, or probably at least reduced, my consumption by a third just by using the Volcano in the last couple of months.
Oh yeah, like for sure. I've definitely, well, and that's just it, right? Like I've always kind of been around that gram and a half a day. It fluctuates here and there, whatever's kind of going on with life, sort of thing. But yeah, no, with the Mighty, when I'm really kind of paying attention and on my dosing caps and everything, I definitely use less. It's more of an enjoyable experience. I think my only issue with the Mighty is and maybe this is because it comes from joint smoking and being in a circle and wanting to pass around. I prefer a longer session. So I tend to hold my Mighty in my hand for a while.
Sitting on the mic, yep.
Yeah, totally. Because there's nobody there to tell me to pass it, no puff pass. I kind of hold it and I kind of talk with it for a bit. So yeah, a typical medicating session for me is like, 15, 20 minutes. And it's, because I can't get my poop in a group to make it happen.
Well, I think we need to talk about the Venty debacle just briefly. I know you've been patiently waiting for your new Stores and Bickle Venty, which was recently released to market. There have been a few issues with the rollout, including delayed release for you and a recall for others. So what's your take on this less than smooth rollout?
This is an epic fail for Stores and Bickles. I gotta be honest, man. Like, they're kind of the bar, if you will. And how many years did they take to like redesign this thing? And then they totally dropped the ball, like right out of the gate. Like, who didn't expect massive say? Like, I don't know. That it's a total, yeah. Anyways, in theory, when did I order it? Like over a month ago, like 6 weeks ago now. I'd have to like check my emails, but in theory, it should be here in the next week or so. So
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, and let's hope it works. It's not one that like shits the bed right out of the box.
It does look pretty cool. So I'm really, I'm really hopeful for you that once it arrives, it's everything you could have wanted and more.
I'm super hopeful, but I'm going to lower my expectations right away because the two things that I wanted smaller and better battery life. And neither one of those things happened.
When I first saw the pictures, I'm like, oh, great, this is going to be tiny, like, cigarette lighter size or something.
Me too.
No, they did the promotional video. I'm like, wow, it's bigger.
Yeah, I did the same thing. You did. I think we all did that. We were like, oh, wow, it's going to be like somewhere in between the mighty and the crafty. This is great. No.
It's like a late 80s cell phone, basically.
Yes!
Yeah.
Nailed it. It totally is.
Well, I can't wait to hear what it's like when you do eventually get it. So I hope it turns up and in great shape soon.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Well, let's take a short break from our conversation for a moment, as I'd like to play a game. In my research, I learnt that you were a bar manager at Red Robin in Vancouver for 4 years in the mid-2000s. So we're going to play a short quiz to learn a little bit more about this American casual dining burger chain. Are you ready for a quiz?
All right, bring it.
All right. Question 1. Red Robin was officially founded in 1969 with the first restaurant opening in which US city? Was it A, Seattle, Washington, B, Tacoma, Washington, or C, Portland, Oregon?
Oh my God. I don't know. Portland, Oregon, that's so wrong.
Denied. It was Seattle, Washington. That was indeed the location of the first store, which closed in 2014 because the maintenance on the building was too expensive.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right. Question 2. Prior to 1969, Red Robin operated as an independent restaurant at that first Seattle location. What was the name of this restaurant initially? Was it A, Beige Robin, B, Red Batman, or C, Sam's Red Robin Tavern?
Oh, that's totally Sam's Red Robin Tavern.
That is correct.
Indeed, named after the original owner, Samuel Caston. Very good. You're 1 from 2, 50% at this stage.
Oof, okay, all right.
Question 3. In 2014, the Center for Science in the Public Interest released its annual list of extreme eating awards for the most calorie-laden chain restaurant meal. What award did Red Robin win? Was it unhealthiest sauces, unhealthiest desserts, or unhealthiest meal?
Oh man. I'm gonna go unhealthiest desserts.
Denied.
Oh God.
It was the unhealthiest meal. They've got their monster double burger paired with bottomless fries and a milkshake, rounding out to 3,540 calories in that one single meal. And you can, of course, add another patty for another 400 calories on there.
Well, those bottomless fries will get you, though.
I was reading about one group of guys that ordered 31 orders of bottomless fries. So, yeah, keeping them on their toes.
Yeah, they're delicious, though. Oh, yum.
All right, question 4. What staple food item was not added to the menu until 1973? So 4 years after Red Robin was founded, which menu item was not yet on the menu until 1973? Was it fries, hamburgers, or steak?
Fries.
Denied.
Oh my God. You're not going to hire me now.
It was hamburgers, actually. So for the first 4 years of Red Robin's existence, they didn't even have hamburgers. So now famous for their burgers, they weren't even on the menu initially.
Look, Paul, I thought you were going to ask me like what my favorite milkshake was or something.
Look, I do lob people some softballs from time to time, but hey, Red Robin is clearly an intricate topic.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, they're not going to hire me back.
We've got our lucky last question, number 5. In 1960, the red robin was voted as what country's national bird? Was it Australia, Switzerland, or the United Kingdom?
The United Kingdom?
That is correct.
Yes, you ended on a correct answer. That is right. So in 1960, there was a poll in the United Kingdom that named the red robin the national bird. They reviewed it in 2015 and it remained the national bird. So it's got nothing to do with the restaurant, but it was the 5th fact about red robins that I could find. You scored 2 out of 5. You're right. They're never hiring you back, but thank you for playing the red robin quiz.
Oh, God. Oh, well.
Oh, well, indeed. Hey, look, we all learnt something about red robin then. Thank you for playing. Back to our cannabis conversation. Canada is often looked at as the beacon of inspiration for cannabis legalization, but Canada and BC in particular have a long history with cannabis. So I'm curious to know about your experiences prior to federal legalization. You know, you spoke about your time in Texas buying off the black market. You alluded to your time in Grand Prairie with your mighty spruiking black market dealer. What were your experiences prior to federal legalization in Canada? Can you speak to, I guess, the availability and the quality, you know, quote unquote, back in your day?
Back in my day, now all of a sudden I'm old. No, I'm just kidding. You know what? I was super duper lucky. Like when I first got there, I worked with an amazing girl at Earl's restaurant there, right? I was an Earl's girl back in the day. Anyways, she introduced me to somebody who I refer to as the guy in some of my reviews. You know, you got to know somebody who knew somebody kind of thing. And so almost right off the bat, it was like boutique bud before we had boutique bud. Like, again, coming from Texas and the black market, like straight up brick weed, Mexican dirt. I laugh about it now, but like as teenagers in high school, we were 100% buying our nickel and dime bags from a woman who was getting it from dirty cops. Like that's just how, yeah, like I said, I look back on it and I laugh, but that's just how it was. Like that's, you got it where you could find it. And when you were a teenager, you didn't know better and you weren't picky, I guess, right? And then, like I said, I got to Vancouver and I met this guy and he was like, let me just blow your mind. And it was just amazing in the sense that it was all these things that I didn't know cannabis could be, if you will, until I met this guy who just kind of tucked me under his wing. And he was a retired out of work actor. He used to get his stuff from hippies on Salt Spring Island.
Oh, yep.
Right. So, you know, he would take me out there every now and then. I'd be hanging out with these hippies and like not crazy fields of like hundreds of plants or anything like that. But, you know, like backyard grows that had like 20, 30 plants in them that was grown by some dude that you were like, you're rough around the edges, but my God, you grow a beautiful garden, mate. Do you ever? Right. So I got a really unique experience to be able to say, yeah, I had White Widow back in the early 2000s. I had Blueberry Kush, right? Like all these things that, you know, you hear about now. And I'm like, yeah, I had
that. Yeah, been there, done that. Yeah.
Yeah. It was great. It was awesome. So and it was everywhere. Like I'm old enough to tell you that I've been to, what was it, Blunt Brothers, the cafe that burnt down there in Vancouver. I'm old enough to tell you that, you know, don't jaywalk when you go, and that you had to walk upstairs and it was owned by a questionable association, that you had to have a certain knock to get in the door. Yeah, it was shady, but good times, right? Like amazing pot that just kept me very eager to learn more things, right? Because again, when you're coming from brickweed, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, like this is a whole nother, like this is the same plant? No way.
Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it? When you just like, when you look at what you had as a 16-year-old and then you see what's available now, it does feel like a completely different plant. It's almost alien.
It does, right? And then when you see it, when somebody who's grown up with some love, that looks totally different than, you know, I'm not saying that what we're getting now isn't grown by love, but, you know, we're talking about corporations that are growing thousands of plants, like even boutique, like small batch, we're still talking thousands of plants, right? We're not talking hundreds, we're talking thousands.
At best, they're probably growing it with like.
Yeah. And I don't want to hate on that. I don't want to hate on that, but there's a little bit of a disconnect there, right? At the end of the day, no matter how great a mass corporation grow is, they're never going to be able to duplicate some of the stuff that I had, in the early 2000s. And it's not because they don't have the good genetics or they don't have guys that know how to do it or whatever it is. It's just back in the day, there was like 3 people that touched my shit before I touched it. The dude that like put it in the ground, the dude that pulled it out of the ground, and the guy that like gave it to me in the bag, right? I took it home kind of thing. Like that was the supply chain kind of thing.
What have been your observations of federal legalization, whether from your own experience or people that you speak to back home? When I was a bud tender, I had very mixed feelings because as an Australian coming to Canada, the federal legalization model was an incredible privilege. It allowed people, in their 60s to walk off the street into these beautiful stores and have this experience that they hadn't had before. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people involved in establishing the culture of cannabis, growing those boutique buds that you saw well before legalization. And that has, affected the opinion of legalization for a lot of people, particularly in BC. So what are your observations of that federal legalization program?
There were some hits and there were some misses for sure. I think the biggest fail, if you will, in Canada was that, yeah, it was legal federally, but then they left it up to all the provinces to kind of sort it out. And so there was no cohesive framework. And you might know a little bit better than I would, but this is where I might be wrong, but I want to say it was Quebec and there was like one dispensary in the whole province. And that was completely controlled by their government kind of thing. And so there was no competitive pricing. There was no, how do you get into that market? How do you this? How do you that? So yeah, it was legal, but it wasn't really a fair playing field, if you will, right?
Yeah, there's all sorts of strange regulations. Like Manitoba and Quebec, you can't grow your own. So, there's a guy named Jesse Lavoie from an organization called Toba Grown that has taken the government to the Supreme Court in order to get that to change. And, that's been a 5-year battle now. And again, we've spoken about the kind of time that things take. What a waste of time, because the federal government went, yep, part of this is 4 plants. And Quebec and Manitoba went, no, we want to make the money off you. We don't want you growing your own. You need to be buying it from us.
Yeah, which is, straight up bullshit, right? Like, hi, federally, we can do this. But then, like I said, they were left to their own devices. And yeah, so I do hope that Australia learns from that, because I'm positive there are these legacy growers here in the country that have been keeping their genetics alive, just like, how I was lucky enough to meet some of those people back in the day. I'm sure we've got that here. So I really do hope that when we do make those steps towards legalization, because I do think it'll happen. I don't think it's 2 to 3 years. I think 5 to 7 best case scenario, right? Realistically, probably closer to 10, right? But I do hope that they learn that those mistakes, if you will, and that they do. Look, Australia, we can grow some amazing things here, whether it's mangoes or macadamias or
You've got the climate.
Man, cows. Like there's so much that we can do agriculturally here. So I don't understand why we wouldn't want to embrace cannabis as part of that.
Yeah, I think we're kind of smothered by the, I guess, very close to the surface conservatism. I think Australia gets this reputation of being cruisy and laid back, but I think anyone that's spent a bit of time abroad knows that maybe we've, not quite earned that reputation, or it's not quite accurate. Our politics don't have it. Our government doesn't have it. Everything's very slow, cautious, conservative. Unless it's gambling in sports, then go for it. Then that can be everywhere, but don't you dare smoke weed.
Yeah, no, it's true. Or, have a beer with me.
Have 40 beers.
Yeah, I gotta have a beer with Duncan because Duncan's my mate, right? Like it's kind of unreal. Like one of my favorite stories to tell when I first moved here is I was bartending and I was a day bartender, and it would blow me away because every now and then I would get these people that would come in who would put money down on the counter for a schooner of beer. And before I could I'd pour it, I'd put it down, I'd take their money before I could get to the till, and back with the change, they'd chug it and be like ready to walk out the door. And I'd be like, hey, it's how did you, but have a good day at work.
It's
See
11
you
a.m. on a Tuesday. Have a good one.
Yeah. And nobody blinks an eye at that. Right. And so, like, to me, that's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've got a long way to go, but it's really important to change those social stigmas. You know, I've been the guy before being berated for bringing a joint to a party. It doesn't matter that 20 people are smoking it with me. I was the awful man that dare bring it. Meanwhile, someone's over in the corner throwing up because I've had too many vodka cruises, but I'm still the bad guy.
That's all right. I was always the bad influence. Just go with it, man. Just go with it.
Yeah, I think you've just got to lead into being the villain because most people are enjoying that joint that you've brought.
Exactly, man. They are. And if they don't want to admit to it, well, that's their own problem.
You mentioned that, you know, there are definitely things the rest of the world can learn from Canada. What do you think we can learn from them? Like, obviously, perhaps maybe a bit more of a broad approach would be better than allowing, you know, all the states to do completely different things, because it is difficult for the consumer to cross borders and know what they're allowed to do if everything's so different. But is there anything that you've noticed that we really could learn from them, whether it's something to do or something to not do?
That's a good question. I do think one of the biggest things is, again, having a cohesive framework for it, right? So that way you know exactly what, I don't want to be like what you can get away with. That's not how but like, you know, we know what our legal limit is to blow when we've gone out to have a couple drinks, no matter where we are in the country. We know what's expected. So I think we should have, again, a cohesive framework, right? But I also don't think that there needs to be, 3-year trial on whether or not we can drive, right? I think we should use a little bit more common sense on some things. I think that, yeah, no, we shouldn't be packaging things with bright colored things and flashy so they look, appealing to kids. Again, common sense things. I don't think that I don't think that the government needs to be quite so concerned about the society falling apart. I think a lot of the market will sort itself out. I think the good will rise to the top. And, there's always going to be people that want the budget bud. There are always going to be, companies that are going to undercut and this and that. But then there's always going to be consumers that are going to pay for the better products, if you will. And so good regulation, but like I said, you got to let that market kind of sort itself out a bit.
Yeah, I think there needs to be some room for trust for people and for adults to make good decisions, knowing that inevitably some people are not going to make the right decisions, but we probably shouldn't all be punished for that. So certainly something that I think should be built in is the ability to review the rules and regulations. You know, one of the things in Canada is it's so slow. They kind of set things in stone, and then to change anything, whether forwards or backwards, then the wheels have to get in motion and it takes years and years. So I would hope to see, yeah, you're not going to get the rules right straight away. Put into legislation what you can, but then also mechanisms to change things when they see fit. So, you answered that question already that I was going to ask. When do you see legalization happening? 5 to 7 years. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah, we're hoping, right? 5 to 7 years. I don't see why not, though, to be honest. In 5 to 7 years, I think there'll be more states in the US that are legal, that are not legal. I think, Texas is going to be one of those strongholds that'll just going to hold out to the last minute, if you will.
Aren't they ever? Yeah.
Yeah, but they're all going to fall eventually, right? Eventually, there's too much money in it for them not to fall.
That's all I ever want conservative politicians to see. Just like, see the cash cow that it is. If you can't, if you don't want to partake and you don't see any value in it for people, at least see the monetary value that's there. You've got Colorado funding half their education department with $10 million a month coming from cannabis taxes. So these things can be achieved.
Yeah, no, when I look at things like that, I'm like, oh my God, what's wrong with us here in Queensland? Well, we got a teacher shortage. We got ambulances ramping. We got doctor shortage. Like, hi, we have horrible roads here. Oh my God.
A rental crisis.
Yeah, like social housing. And again, I'm not saying that we're going to generate $1 billion in taxes overnight, but oh my God, what if we just generated 10 million in the first year? Think of the things we could do for our community with that.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting. Fingers crossed. I'm glad that you're doing the advocacy work you're doing and keeping people informed the way they should be. You're doing a lot more than the average Redditor who posts a picture of their buds and goes, looks pretty good.
It's really hard, man.
Well, now that we have reached the conclusion of this show, it's time for polls of wisdom. So though we value the long form conversation, we must now leave the listener with one key takeaway, dinner party fact, or even a call to action. So what is your poll of wisdom, Christina?
it's a call to action. And I've been saying it through the whole podcast. So if people have been listening, they already know what I'm going to say. It's have that conversation. It doesn't matter who you are. If cannabis has been a positive in your life, tell somebody, talk to them, break down the stigma, because it's through these conversations that policies change, that people who wouldn't try a medicinal cannabis product will try it because they're struggling with whatever it is. But then the second you talk to them, they're like, oh, that worked for you. Well, maybe I can try that for me. And the only way that happens is if you have those conversations.
Fantastic. You're such a wonderful advocate for the plant. I love that you spend so much of your own time doing this work, for the benefit of people. Obviously, we gain knowledge from doing this work, but you are helping a lot of people. And sometimes you don't get the praise that you deserve for that, but know that you are helping others. So if people want to get in touch with you, Christina, where can they find you?
Oh, I'm all over the place. AusCannaReviews on Substack. I'm on Instagram. I'm also on X, or formerly Twitter. Yeah, come find me, come interact with me. Let's build a community.
I'll make sure those links are in the show notes. Christina, thank you again for your passion, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Give and Toke Cannabis Conversations is written and produced by me, Paul. Music written and produced by Big Mike. Follow us on Instagram at Give and Toke, or get in touch by emailing giveandtoke@gmail.com. All opinions expressed by program guests are solely their current opinions and do not necessarily reflect the position of Give and Toke. Content discussed in this show does not constitute medical advice. Cannabis is not legal everywhere, so please be aware of local laws.